The last thing I expected on a Tuesday morning was to see two HOA security officers in matching windbreakers aiming deer rifles at a Coast Guard rescue chopper. They were screaming about unauthorized airspace violations over my ranch. 10 minutes later, 3 black SUVs and an unmarked van came screaming down my dirt road. A federal agent stepped out and told them to put the toys down before someone got hurt. But I should start from the beginning. My name is Grant Harlow. I own 120 acres on the edge of Maple Hollow Estates, a neighborhood that thinks the world revolves around their koi pond. The HOA president, Darlene Crow, has been gunning for me for years. She wanted my working cattle ranch to integrate into their visual uniformity guidelines. Apparently, my cows were destroying the aesthetic value of their McMansions. Darlene's harassment started small. Fines for the wrong shade of brown on my fence. Claims my barn was an eyesore. She'd show up at my gate with a measuring tape and a digital camera like a detective at a crime scene. Then, she upgraded to the HOA Tactical Response Unit. This consisted of 2 retired mall cops, Roger and Steve. They drove a white minivan with AR-15 decals and wore tactical vests from a military surplus store. Roger was 60 pounds overweight and wheezed if he walked 20 feet. Steve had the tactical awareness of a goldfish. They'd patrol my perimeter in a blacked-out golf cart with an internet-bought light bar, crackling into walkie-talkies about suspicious activity. Usually, that meant the mailman. Then came the letters about agricultural misconduct. Darlene actually claimed my barn owls were a noise violation. My lawyer found it so funny he framed the letter. Everything changed in July. A massive wildfire broke out 15 miles away. By 6 a.m., the sky was an apocalyptic orange. FEMA called me. They needed my land as a staging area for rescue helicopters. I'd signed the paperwork weeks ago. By 8 a.m., the first Coast Guard chopper touched down in my north pasture. My barn became a command post. Medics were triaging people near my shed. These people were saving lives. That's when Darlene made her entrance. She rolled up in her Lexus with HOA president plates, followed by the tactical minivan. She marched toward a suit-covered firefighter and shrieked that this was a federal trespass on HOA-regulated airspace. The firefighter just stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Roger and Steve didn't wait for a discussion. They grabbed their deer rifles, cheap hunting guns with bipods, and took positions at my fence line. Steve was shouting about sovereign HOA territory. Then, Roger fired a warning shot. It whistled dangerously close to the helicopter's rotor. The pilot aborted the takeoff immediately. The air was full of screaming and the smell of ozone. Suddenly, 3 black SUVs tore into the pasture. Federal marshals in full gear poured out. Roger and Steve went from playing soldier to face down in the dirt in about 3 seconds. Marshal Davidson walked over to Darlene. She actually tried to hand him the HOA bylaws. Subsection 12.4 gives us jurisdiction over all aircraft within 500 feet, she lectured. Davidson looked at the paper, then at her, with pure disbelief. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cold enough to freeze water, "you just committed multiple federal crimes." The investigation was a total collapse for the HOA. Darlene had been using resident dues to fund her militia. She'd purchased the rifles and equipment with community money and created fake law enforcement badges. She'd even registered her security force as a private police agency using forged documents. She'd convinced Roger and Steve they had actual arrest powers. During the trial, the Coast Guard pilot testified. He talked about the 7-year-old girl with severe burns on board. The delay those warning shots caused could have cost that little girl her life. The judge was visibly shaking with anger. Darlene's lawyer tried the overzealous protection defense. Then the prosecutor pulled up her emails. She'd been researching maritime law, convinced it applied to the air over her neighborhood. She'd even discussed making the HOA a sovereign entity. The board members turned on her one by one. They admitted they were terrified of her. One man broke down, describing how she threatened to foreclose on his house over invented fines. The verdicts were swift. Roger and Steve, 5 years in federal prison for reckless endangerment. Darlene Crow, 8 years for conspiracy, impersonating federal officers, and embezzlement. The judge called it a grotesque abuse of power. As the verdict was read, Darlene's face went from red to white, to a strange shade of purple. She fainted right there in the courtroom. The fire is out now. The helicopters are gone. My cows are back to grazing in the north pasture, and the barn owls are as loud as they want to be. Maple Hollow has a new board now. They don't have a tactical unit. They don't have a light bar. And last week, they sent me a letter. It wasn't a fine. It was a thank you note for letting the medics use my land. I think I'll keep that one. I won't even frame it. I'll just leave it on the dashboard of my truck, a reminder of the day the HOA tried to take on the United States government and lost.